Sometimes you come across a panel that just boggles the mind. From these panels, beautiful out-of-context moments can be born. For on their own, these panels can be hilarious or cursed. But as amusing as it is to look at these types of moments out of context, it can be even more rewarding to see just where these panels come from. You can discover some fun stories that way. Why is Power Girl licking Superman's face? The tale this comes from is JLA/JSA Virtue and Vice, a title that I will never not struggle to say the other way. Vice and Virtue. Every time, but it's Virtue and Vice. This story and the context behind this panel is so much more fun, exciting, rewarding, and layered at points than it can be conveyed by merely describing why it arises. This panel, that is. The cliff notes don't do it justice. There are some stories that sound more exciting when you explain them than they are, and then there are other stories that you just don't get everything across. Now, when it pertains to this panel, it's a very small instance or moment in this, but it stands out because most people don't want to see Power Girl lick Superman's face. I said most. I know that there are some people out there who have exceptions to this rule. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and we're going to see just how this panel came about as we explore Virtue and Vice. Written by David S. Goyer and Geoff Johns. It has art by Carlos Pacheco, inks Jesus Marino, and colors by Guy Major. Its setup was what was at the time becoming a tradition. This comic was released in 2002, and that tradition was the JSA, the Justice Society of America, and the JLA, the Justice League of America, coming together to celebrate Thanksgiving. They were doing a massive combined Thanksgiving event, and this time they were doing it on the moon. This story has a huge cast of characters, and even more that come in as it unfolds. So you get a lot of little character interactions that are light, fun, in some cases enlightening, and some of the characters in this get some nice highlights. Not everyone, there are too many people for that, but there are some salient moments. The story opens on Superman and Sentinel, Alan Scott, observing the Earth, just to relax and put things in perspective. And to set the tone, the two teams admire each other. Superman's talking about how much he used to look up to the JSA, while Alan is saying that they've been inspired by these younger heroes, and this scene is then paralleled later. It's replicated and mirrored when Stargirl runs into Wally. And so we see how the generational aspects of both teams have led to layers of admiration and inspiration in the continuation of these heroes, both younger and older. Our splash page showcases just how many people are gonna be in this book, and also puts a spotlight on Pacheco's art, which goes a long way to giving the characters distinctive feels, which will matter a lot because there are so many characters. We get a series of moments here. There's downtime, there's banter, and a lot of it is in character, and that makes it feel substantive rather than like padding. It's setting the tone, showcasing connections.
Fifth time he called Hawkman a feathered fascist. I thought he was gonna shove one of those arrows right up his—
Is Green Arrow even in character if he's not calling someone a fascist? That's how you'll know if he's a pod person. As chairman of the JSA, I understand time management, Batman, but everyone has to eat. This gathering is interrupted when Superman notices an international incident happening in Tanzania at the Pan-African World Conference, and so goes with backup to check it out because it's revealed to be Dr. Bedlam, so it's kind of a big deal. Lex is at this event because this was the President Lex Luthor era, a period which at the time when this was first released seemed as subtle as a sledgehammer, but comparative to time of recording is a deft and light touch when it comes to inserting socio-political commentary into works. Miles will vary, some prefer the latter, some prefer the former. We're not here for that. We're here for Power Girl licking her alternate universe cousin's face. There's a fun moment where after it's settled, the media asks Superman and Lex to pose together, and not only do they pose like it's an album cover, but Superman's face, he's just so bothered. But after that, things start to go awry. The two teams come together to try and figure out just what happened and why Dr. Bedlam did this. This isn't his usual MO. It just seems strange, and suddenly there's a lot of tension in the air. People are starting to grate on each other, and negative personality traits are starting to be a bit amplified. These older costumes were pretty lame if you ask me. I mean, look at the original Mr. Terrific here. I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that. At least he's not wearing no dog collar. It starts off subtly, with members that have clashed before over issues they've had before, but it quickly explodes. It's that scene from the first Avengers, or rather, this came first, so that scene from the first Avengers is like this. But the emotions amplified by outside influence is not a new concept. It escalates really quickly. Kyle has some over-the-top moments that just stick out regarding his insecurities about being Green Lantern, and just his hang-ups about where he stands in the legacy of Green Lantern, especially because time that was released, Sentinel was back in play. Hal was still dead. He was the Spectre. You had your day in the sun, Sentinel. I'm Green Lantern now. I am. There's some extra meta layers here, what with Hal coming back to life a few years later. Now in the midst of all this chaos, all this fighting, it's our time. Time for the lick.
Power Girl, what?
Say yum.
What do you think you're—
Rocking your world, Superman. Cursed. We all have 7 days to live now. Joking. Now these panels are the result of something, a reveal that's built to, but for our purposes we need to reveal it right now. 7 superheroes, some from the Justice League and some from the JSA, have been possessed by the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 ills of man, who are imprisoned at the Rock of Eternity. So this is Captain Marvel business, or at least it's Captain Marvel related. That's where the shenanigans hail from. But really we have villains coming from all corners for this. One specifically tied to the Justice League, one specifically tied to the JSA. Now as one can most likely glean, Power Girl has been possessed by lust. There are many interesting layers that potentially take note of, so why not? We'll cliff notes just over some of them that may come up. Now there's the narrative level where lust may have chosen the Power Girl vessel for the increased ease with which they will be able to spread their influence. For the sins are also spreading an empathic kind of virus, amplifying the urge to act out based on their various sins or moral decays. Like Batman, who has been overtaken by anger or wrath and then is used to amplify those feelings in Gotham City. So citizens start just to fight each other to seek their own justice because the system in the city isn't doing it for them. There's also meant to be an additional layer and link between sin and character chosen. The alleged envy driven by insecurity in Kyle, greed harkening back to Plastic Man or Eel O'Brien's criminal past, pride for Mr. Terrific. One could question if lust truly fits Power Girl or not. In this era, she's certainly assertive, aware of and in control of her image, and quick to let people know if they've overstepped, but also still with the assurance to want to present herself a certain way. She is inclined towards flaunting her assets. However, lustful, less so. At least not in the classic sense of how lust tends to be depicted, which leans a bit into some of the metatextual socio-cultural reasons potentially in play for choosing Power Girl. One, she's female, and an extremely stereotypically attractive one. There's a fantasy element at play here, an additional one on top of all the superhero fantasy elements. And while it doesn't necessarily have to exclusively be a male one, based on the creative team and overall makeup of the comic book industry in general, it stands to reason there is some element of male fantasy at play here. The beautiful woman who just wants you and wants you to want her and do what you must to have her. Also, she's just all over you. That same kind of aggressiveness would come across very differently in a male lust, largely because of the different societal expectations and histories at play surrounding male sexuality. A male lust licking Superman's face just elicits and evokes different kinds of reactions. One first has to wade through the dominance of the heterosexual gaze, making it a less likely route to even be chosen, which is a factor in whoever is chosen, male or female, because, I mean, she licked Clark's face, not Diana's. I'm sure to the disappointment of some. All of these statements are not meant as positives or negatives, merely observations, threads to potentially pull on. In general, that same kind of activity in a female is not viewed as harmful, playing into ideas that females can't assault, or all men, because of again assumptions about male sexuality, would welcome a woman's advances, especially a woman who looked like Power Girl, all of which of course are not true statements. Anyone can be a predator. All of these are interesting ideas to interrogate, and some are very worthy of interrogation, but most of them most likely remain below the surface. It's much more likely, though not guaranteed, perhaps there were intense discussions of the implications that Power Girl was chosen, but it is more likely that it was just because A, she's very attractive, and B, you can get that shock panel of her licking Superman's face and very quickly convey that something is wrong. Just that one panel you can tell that something's not right. So in that way, it's super effective. It must also be noted that Captain Marvel punches Superman in the face right after this, and he is possessed by gluttony, and also the focal point for all of this happening, at least in terms of the sins element, because he gets his energy from the wizard who guards the Rock of Eternity, which also leads to a great moment later on where he's wrapped in the lasso by Green Arrow. It's a good Green Arrow moment, and he's forced to reveal the truth, and he forces him to say Shazam by saying he has to reveal where he gets his powers, and it's a really strong moment. Very cool. But back to this moment where he's punching Superman, some feel that the lick was a distraction so that he could do that. I personally don't gravitate towards that explanation because Superman was already really distracted by the fact that Martian Manhunter had suddenly lost control of his body and was literally melting. Now, while one could fall into an academic quagmire and write an entire dissertation on Power Girl as lust, as it pertains to the story, it's a small moment, and she's not depicted as throwing herself at everyone or the like. In fact, in overall possession terms, it's kept very in check. In fact, very few of the possessions venture into caricature territory. A couple do. Looking at you, Kyle, and Plastic Man. Mostly they come across like dark entities spreading their moral blight across humanity and reveling in it, some with more focus than others. And there are some nice link-ups between sins that at times parallel the non-corruptive relationships characters had. For example, the friendship between Batman and Mr. Terrific is then paralleled in the team-up between anger and pride, in a very clever syncing up between the two characters' complementary traits, both positive and negative. Now, all of this was a plan between Johnny Sorrow and Despero, and there is some wonderful calling back to past adventures between the League and Society, because we have a villain out here for both of them, and it's very fun. fun. There are several battles with intense moments, people have to break off into different groups, there are callbacks. It feels like things are collapsing. Johnny Sorrow's impact here has a lot of weight, especially when you contrast with him pulling essentially the same idea in the Power Girl special from 2023, which is at the forefront of my mind because I read it recently, time of recording. In that, he was easily defeated by Power Girl, Omen, and some stragglers, and he also had an equivalent of the Four Horsemen that were just trying to take over everything. Whereas here, to take down him and Despero, it took a combined effort of almost every single hero, which definitely made him and Despero feel a lot more dangerous. There are also some great panels hinting at the themes of corruption and erosion of the American dream or societal values, questioning them. Some of these panels don't even have any dialogue at all. And also, if one doesn't want to look at any layers, it's just a very fun action comic with lots of moments to highlight. And that lick to the face is just a small one. One of the coolest Power Girl panels vis-a-vis lust possession is how she is depicted inside the Rock of Eternity. Just all the lustful energy is so perfectly conveyed, and the variance between her pose and the statue's original pose really works with the fact that lust shows a female body. So the pose has been adjusted to accommodate that, and the pose is associated with that. Just in general, how all of them are conveyed, you could take the labels off and you could pretty well identify most of them. It's just a very good piece. I would love that as a poster, and then people would have lots of questions for me and I wouldn't answer them. If you like big giant team-ups and characters you don't always see together bouncing off of each other in a solidly constructive, cohesive narrative, Virtue and Vice is a fun one. It even bookends with the same concept it opened on, of perspective. We do still get to see Superman and Sentinel, but this time we also get a mentorship moment between Wonder Woman and Stargirl, who are then looking up. It's a very nice full circle moment. I could make a whole list of moments from this little arc. Stargirl freaking out because she sees Superman bleed, but then also getting to have a moment where she heals him. Firestorm realizing that he can alter Sand's molecules because Sand's silicone based and not carbon based. Kyle punching Hal's Coast City statue. If they knew all the deets, they would not have a statue there. If I get too into it though, this video will balloon. Now, of course, this will not be for everyone. For some, it will be too busy. And if you're not familiar with all the characters, it may be less exciting. And some of the interactions are tropey and formulaic. Like the Black Canary has to go on a mission with Womp Womp, her ex, Dr. Midnight, and her current BF, Green Arrow. Jealousy and shenanigans ensue. But on the whole, this is a very solid, fun little story arc. These two groups just need to stop trying to celebrate together. So now you know where the cursed panel comes from. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? Did the context help? Did it make it worse? How do you feel about Power Girl possessed by lust? Is that trope played out? Questionable? Meh. Have you read this story? Does it appeal to you? I want to hear all your thoughts. Put them down below. This is the kind of video where I wish you could also just post your own variants of cursed panels, but it is not to be. But I still want to hear from you. Please do all the YouTube things, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. And thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.